And let's see.
Okay, while Kelly is pulling up her PowerPoint slides, I'm going to just do a quick introduction and say Kelly Billing is a rock star in the water gardening world, and I am not exaggerating by
Oh,
tone.
Kathy.
She is a wonder. And so I've worked with her extensively with the International Water Garden Society and Water Lily Society. She does a lot of writing for us and has done research, and she's like the go-to expert on many things. But today, she's going to be talking about her business, I think, and her Lotus collection and the miniature lotuses, correct, Kelly?
I'm going to talk about all kinds of lotuses.
Okay,
All
cool.
things about lotus. How's that? All things.
All things lotus, not to be confused with water lilies. And I find that a lot with the lay gardeners that they conflate the two as the same plant.
Yes,
But
they do.
so Kelly will be defining that for us and talking all about lotus. I'm going to let you have all the time, Kelly, and then we'll get to Q&A afterwards. Would you like people to hold their questions or put them all in the chat?
It's. Would you like to be a chat monitor?
Yep,
Like it's hard for me to talk
I
and
can
then
monitor the
read chat
chat.
at the same
Yeah,
time.
I could do
I'm
that. I could read
easily
you.
sidetracked.
Mhm. And I
Uh,
could read the questions at the end when you're ready for Q&A.
oh yeah.
All right, take it away, Kelly.
Okay, and you can see my screen. We're all good.
It says mini to magnificent.
Yes.
There
Okay,
you
good.
go.
All right, there we go. So, uh, as Kathy said, water lilies and lotus are not the same family. They used to be the same family. They were in they were believed to be of the same growing habit, and they have since been separated. Water lilies grow in deeper water. They also come in all shapes and sizes, but they're rooted in deeper water, and their leaves lie primarily on the surface. Lotus, on the other hand, grow in shallower to deeper water, with their leaves standing upright out of the water. My computer a little bit closer. I got sidetracked answering email while I was waiting. Um, so, hmm, oh goodness gracious. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a little review of, Lotus has been around for millions of years, documented way back in fossils to, I can't remember which period, but a long time ago. They have been foundationally infused in art, in culture, in food, in medicine. They're one of the most researched plants in the world and one of the most largely misunderstood plants in the world. They're believed to be exotic, tropical, difficult, and none of that could be further from the truth. So they have been um, uh, used culturally. I mean, in design and architecture, in fountains, in fabrics. Was
Excuse
the
me, Kelly froze for me. Did she for everybody else? Yeah. Kelly, you seem to have froze for a minute, Yep,
but I
just
think
for a
we're
second.
coming
I,
back, so that's good. I'm here. Do you have me?
we got you now. Thank you.
Okay. So Paula Biles went to Thailand with the IWGS. I didn't get to go, and she brought me back a box with a lotus leaf wrapped around it. And if you know lotus leaves, when they're dry, they're very crispy. Um, so I tried to find out how they did that, and I was told it was a Thai trade secret, and they couldn't divulge how it was done. Um, I got challenged, and then I made some of my own artwork with lotus leaves. So I was able to attach it to a canvas, but It just means that Lotus has been a foundation for art in the world from thousands of years ago and still is. In architecture, there are buildings around the world. There's even a building in West Virginia built to look like a lotus. It's a temple. Um, these are in, I think, Singapore, Shanghai, and another city. I can't recall. The top left one and the center one on the top, those are a museum. And the walls of that museum cast shadows. It also has a fountain that runs through the center of it that falls from the bottom of the building into some water lily pools beneath it. So it's has a profound impact on cities and cultures around the world. I learned and fell in love with lotus through my children. This was our first lotus planting. My son was about 4, and we moved into a new house, and there was nothing there but straw, grass seed, and dirt. And I asked him at that time, I said, "Do you know what build it and they will come means?" And he said, "No." So we buried a container and planted a lotus and then planted a garden around the lotus. My children used that plant in the backyard. It was in a 32-inch wide container, 12 inches deep. So with 3 or 4 inches of soil, it still had 8 or 9 inches of water. In 14 days, we found 14 things that had taken up residence there in the middle of nothing. From dragonflies to water boatmen, frogs, toads, tadpoles. We counted the cat. I always say we counted the cat because the cat was bopping at the frogs that were in the water. But in this little 32-inch diameter container, in 2 weeks, drew this abundant wildlife. So things are always in motion around it. My children saw lotus without any adulteration, and we used it for birthday party hats. We used it to cook. We used it for blankets. We used it for sword fighting, seed eating, flower petal boats. It was an endless attraction to them. So I got to see it also innocently through children's eyes. So this was our little tub that we built a garden around, and then we built a playhouse. And I will say that that tub is still in the backyard, and so is the playhouse. 1997, I think. In a 32-inch container, my first year I got 28 blooms, and the blooms were 10 to 12 inches across. So you don't need a pond to grow a lotus. You need a vessel that holds water. And I've had people use anything from toilets to bathtubs to coolers to galvanized wash tubs. If it holds water, there is a suitable size lotus. And I will say that they are much, much easier to grow outside of the pond than inside the pond. I have a lady up the road. She has one of the most beautiful gardens filled with roses and lavender and Russian sage, and it's just vibrant jewel tone colors. And she has some hot pink lotus that just come up here and there in her garden that she strategically placed that she can see from her windows. So the bold foliage of lotus is sort of outside of something like gunnera, or I think there's a few other perennials that are really large, bold leaves like that. There isn't much competition. This is my garden pond, and I have grown lotus in there. I just find it easier to grow them outside of the pond. They're easier to manage, easier to maintain, easier to fertilize. You pretty much don't let them run out of water and drop some tablets in once in a while for fertilizer, and that's about it. So around that little playhouse and that little garden, we built a pond that was big enough for my children to swim in, and a fire pit. And I'll say that this is my backyard, and it is a townhouse garden. So it's mostly water, all kinds of plants used for filtration, and also my children swam in there. So you can see the lotus to the right and the back. Everything pretty much surrounded the lotus. I just planted a new cultivar back there for myself. Every now and then I bring something home so that I can learn it better. When you're running fast paced in a nursery, you don't really get to know them. So I brought home an old cultivar that I had before called Titan. It's a very big red. Uh, if you look at pretty much any sector of the or of any gardening industry, you know, there are miniature roses and large roses and long roses and hostas. There's little teeny tiny ones and great big giant ones. Well, Lotus has followed in that trend. Um, there are only two species in the world. There is American lotus and there is Hindu lotus. And there are now easily, because this was several years ago, 4,000 named of lotus. And they come from very teeny tiny to great big giant now. And they have different attributes, which I'll sort of go into. So those are in a teacup, and this is in a 5-foot container. But you can grow them pretty much anywhere. I grow them above ground. I grow them buried. I grow them in ponds, infiltration systems, and I've only lost lotus above ground 3 times, and that was the winter of '96, 2010, and this past winter. So to me, when you have that kind of space between losses, it's not much to fear, but also it just means you get something new. Finding the right container. Lotus needs, they have requirements for depth. Little teeny tiny ones like very shallow water. Great big ones like very deep water. I will say that Thailand definitely leads the world in the best lotus containers. This is one of my favorites. Paula took a picture of that in Thailand. And I just love how the lotus comes up through the holes of the container. But any vessel that holds water will do. If it's something that can crack over the winter months, I have tons of clients that just tip the water out, shoot them into the garage for the winter, and pull them back out in the spring. If you're worried about losing them, it's a very easy way to take care of them. They just don't, you don't want them to hard freeze for extended periods or crack your pot. I'll also say I have cracked a pot. It was a cheap plastic container on a deck, and it broke and it dried out, and it was without water all winter. And I just picked up its pancake of mud and its tubers in the spring, dropped it into a new pot, and it just went on growing. It was also a very mild winter. This is one of the ones which we call not micro, but mini lotus. And that's just a 9-inch pot. 9 inches wide, 5 inches deep. So the flowers and the leaves stand maybe a foot, maybe 18 inches. Very easy to grow. I love the small ones because they have incredible blooming power. However, they also drink a lot of water in a very small vessel. So they have to be watered often. So I'm doing an experiment. Justin Titus, Kathy knows, told me, try growing a mini lotus in a 20-inch pot. We have a 20-inch aquatic pot that's only 6 inches deep. So I'm doing it, and it's amazing. So you're just increasing the surface area, but still keeping the water level and the soil level very shallow. And the amount of blooms, like lotus are just getting started this year, is going to be incredible. I can already tell. I also found some clever hanging baskets, and I have some riverside containers that hang that you can grow lotus And literally, I just am perpetually in a search for pots without holes. Chinese fish bowls, ceramic hanging pots, plastic hanging pots, anything that's durable and sturdy that won't break from the weight of the water. Actually, I posted that on social media, and I had very few comments that said it was wonderful to see a plant in such a small hanging container. Nearly every comment was that my rope was going to break. And I was like, no, I wouldn't do that. But I thought that was funny. As I said, I've grown them in window boxes. It's 2 feet wide. It's it's about 10 inches, no, 2 feet long, about 10 inches wide, and about 10 inches deep. And it just has a few inches of soil, and the rest is water. And it sat above ground on my driveway from 1997 until 2010's winter. And then I did lose them, and then I put water lilies in, which then I lost this past winter. It's sort of my gauge on how hard winter was. But they're lovely. I mean, they're an unmistakable, charming, unique plant. Sits on the driveway, it's close to the hose. I could fill it up regular, and it just blooms like that all summer. My son took these photographs, I think, when he was 6. He was quite the photographer. This was at a garden center in upstate New York. And one of the things that we learned from this, because it's much colder in New York than it is here, if you use a container that's really durable and you put another container inside that container, so that container inside holds the lotus and its soil, the water that surrounds all of that in that big container works as an insulator. So it increases your likelihood of survival through a hard winter because you have extra water that can retain warmth through the day. And the plant is the wiser. It actually raises it up a little bit off of the bottom. So you have increased height in the growing. I'm not sure why I put that in there again, but it did. This is Mrs. Perry D. Slocum, and it is the first one that I put in my backyard. And it's a powerhouse. It's a consistent, incredible, wonderful lotus that is a
Am I frozen or is Kelly frozen?
She is. We all are.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Kelly.
We'll give her a second.
Yeah, she recovered before, so.
I can't really irrigate them enough to keep them really healthy. So these are 3 whiskey barrel liners buried in someone's garden, similar to what I did with a whiskey barrel liner. It's deeper, so it's 25 inches deep. So it has 4 inches of soil, or 4 or 5, and it has a 20-inch reservoir. So a lot more time can pass before you have to add water. And honestly, I really only have to add water here in July and August because the leaves get so big, the rainwater can't get in. But they're very self-sufficient. This was a nursery growing bed. It was just 3 feet wide, 18 feet long. And we used that as inspiration for a project on the Eastern Shore for a client that had a summer home. They were only there 1 month out of the year, and they wanted a flowering hedgerow in August when they were here. So we built, I think, a 400-foot long, 5-foot wide trench, leveled, tiered down the slope. And the lawn was graded so that rainwater would run off to the lotus. And it was a 400-foot flowering hedgerow. It was very effective, I gotta say. Lotus at Longwood has been the staple in their center pool. Now that they've done the renovation, they have removed the lotus from the center pool. Makes me so sad. There's a thalia in there this year. But this was their 20 years without being maintained. They added fertilizer, but they didn't divide it. They didn't refresh the soil. They didn't do anything but clean it up in the fall, fertilize it during the growing season. I think it's a 6 foot or an 8 foot sewer pipe turned sideways. But when I say how easy they are, how carefree, 20 years without doing anything but fertilizing it. So the bigger the container, the more adequate the size, the soil mass, the spread, the happier the plant. So the more space you give it, the happier it'll be. And I'll say happier as in, this was a customer of mine. This is on a community shared lake, and this is a cove that was off of that lake. And when I say your vessel can be any size, I really mean any size. And I told him when he planted it there, I said, what are you going to do when it gets out to the lake and the neighbors find out that you have it? And he said, I'll worry about them because they're not worried about all the weeds and the stagnant water and the stink back here. So I'm going to fix it. And then after I fixed it, if I'm compelled to tell them, I'll tell them. So the first year he planted them, there were just a few. He put in, I don't know, a half a dozen plants in this large cove on a natural lake, what was man-made, but earth bottom. And after a second year, it really started to fill in. If you give a large lotus a lot of room, it'll grow somewhere between 20 and 60 feet each plant each year. So even the mini ones, if you give them a broader surface area, their spread will be significant even though they don't get any taller. So volume is always important. But this was, I think, year 4. And he was so happy. He built another 10 ponds or more, 8, I don't even know. He just started building ponds and adding lotus. Another one and another one and another one. And it became much like Kenilworth Gardens. With walking paths, and he made them wide enough for a golf cart, and he would drive through, and they had benches and torches, and they would sit and smell the lotus at the evening. And he was one of the only customers that ever, I had 2 customers, where they were planted in mass, and they noticed the fragrance at night, even when the flowers were closed and even when they weren't blooming. The leaves emit a very sweet green scent when you have a lot of them. I had another client where we built a false bridge over a stormwater pond. And at first they were against putting lotus in there because they said, oh, they'll take over. It'll be awful. We won't be able to see the water. But that water was overflow from an 8-acre pond. So they had plenty of water. So I eventually won with my compelling argument. And she called me years later. So one side of the bridge, it was a fake bridge with a pipe underneath, was about 30 by 30, and the other side was about 20 by 30. And it appeared as if it was a large lotus lake that the bridge went over. And she said, you know, we come home every night and we stop on the bridge and we put down our windows and we just smell. So if you have an opportunity to plant them in mass, they really do. They reward you for a very long time. I'll also say there's just about every color, every shape, every number of petals. And lotus is just so unique in all of its scientific research. This is what you call the lotus effect. It has a hydrophobic leaf surface. It's been used for research from NASA for spacesuits to my daughter works for a company where they do hospital scrubs in the OR so that blood spatter in the OR, if it falls to the floor because the fabric is not absorbent, it will reduce the blood transfer diseases that can accompany that. It is currently, because of what we call the lotus effect, it is used for convertible car tops, outdoor furniture. If you've ever used Rain-X in your windshield washer fluid in your car, the water will bead on your windshield. That is also the Lotus effect. All technology taken from Lotus. If you soil the leaf, I've taken mud and smeared it all over the leaf, and if you dunk it under the water, it comes up perfectly clean. Under 10,000 times magnification, it's because nothing ever actually touches the leaf. All of these little pinpoints, which is how they mimic that on the surface of a fabric or a textile, don't let the water actually touch anything flat. So they're suspended. So those are dust particles and pollen. It's a pretty remarkable plant. If you go out in the very, very early morning or the late evening or sometimes the middle of the night, there can be droplets of water that form on the edges of the leaf, on the surface of the leaf. I think there are hundreds of thousands of droplets on a foggy night on a lotus leaf. And if you flick it with your finger, they'll all converge and roll right off. So it has many rewarding attributes. This is a foggy night. Every one of those teeny tiny little itty bitty white spots is a droplet of water. I woke up my entire family and friends and made them come over at 1:30 in the morning one night. Said, you've got to see this. It's amazing. Even the pods, the moisture that formed on the pods, on the flowers, on the backs of the leaves, every single thing. They looked like they were covered in frost, and they were truly only covered in dew. American lotus and Hindu lotus both have green pods, green leaves, and pretty much green exterior, like the photograph on the left. And more modern hybridizing has not only changed flower color, but it's changed seed pod color. And I'll say the seeds are delicious, but also in a fresh flower arrangement. I have sold some to florists, and then they hang them to dry them till they're brown to use in arrangements. And I'm like, why aren't you using them when they're purple and orange and red and green and yellow all at the same time? But they're absolutely beautiful. The abundant color of flowers. We didn't have red lotus. We only had dark pink, but the Chinese always called them red. Now we have true reds. And our seed pods, you can see this one is traditional green on the left, but that is what we get. Some of them are just scarlet red. So the seed pods and cut flower arrangements at every phase are absolutely beautiful. And I cut them all the time for vases, and people say, but they only last a couple of days and they drop their petals. And I think that they've just made a new art form on the tabletop underneath of the vase. I love them. I love every part of the way they are whole and every part of the way that they fall apart. And every bit of those parts and pieces is used for food and medicine. And in cut flower arrangements, I'll say in China, they have lotus branch for food, lotus branch for medicine, lotus branch for ornamental purposes, and then lotus branch now for cut flower. And they are aggressively pursuing cultivars that hold their petals so that they don't fall apart so easily and can be used in cut flowers. And the one on the left, the pink one with all the abundant petals, the more petals they have, the tighter they're packed in and attached so they don't fall off as easily. So these plants are being used for hybridizing efforts for getting more lotus for cut flower industry. I also use water lilies, and they open and close each morning. And they also only last a few days, but I feel like a few days with lotus and water lilies in a vase is a few days better than days without lotus and water lilies in a vase. They mix well with so many other aquatic plants. And they can also be folded dozens of ways. Before there were any cultivars whose flower petals would stay intact once you cut them, they would cut them early. And I cut mine early so that the flower petals won't fall off. Once the flower is opened, they want to fall. unless they're one of the newer cultivars. But you can fold them any number of ways to reveal the inside. You can fold them part way so they keep some petals. You can fold them all the way so that you can see the stamens and the seed pods. You can just YouTube how to fold a lotus and you'll find oodles of ways, and they're absolutely all beautiful, and they last in a vase much longer. And then when they dry out all the way, we spray paint them. When I was in China, using them as a cut flower, because that was a really big deal, is to have a cut flower lotus branch. They mixed them in with all kinds of media, bent reeds and fern fronds and cattails. These were some that I did. And I cut some early, some late, some pods. I folded some and didn't fold some and mixed them all together. And I thought they're absolutely beautiful together. So they are, if you have enough, a larger planting, you can cut as many as you want and bring them in or give them to a friend. I give them away all the time. It really makes people happy because they're special compared to other places. The seed pods, this is papyrus and water lilies, lotus seed pods, horsetail, and carnivorous plants. And it made a lovely arrangement. I think that was something that we did here for an event that wasn't in China. But they also mixed in roots. The white things at the bottom, those are lotus roots. And seed pods mixed with other flowers and lotus flowers and some variegated sweet flag and I think some pickerel. So they mix well with just about any other aquatic foliage. I loved the bent reeds. And so they were mixed into anything. We also used them for Christmas in the traditional way, either brown or spray painting them. This was also some hardy geranium seed pods that actually glisten gold that I mixed in. I was surprised at the significant shine that they had. When my children were little, we would have lotus pod painting contests and they would figure out. So I say we have zebra striped ones. We have some that were painted with sponges. We have some that have polka dots and stripes, and some where the inside holes are painted a different color than the outside part of the pod and the back and the stem. So it's a lot of fun for children. It's a lot of fun for adults, I should say too. Just painting seed pods with regular acrylic paint sticks pretty well. I like to use metallic paints because you can mix it up with some pretty vibrant shine. And these are some of the diversity of the newer cultivars. What we used to get that was all green, you can see pink and yellow and purple and red and brown and black, and they're beautiful all on their own. The ones in the foreground here are all American lotus pods. The lotus were dying on the American lotus in the Sassafras River here in Maryland. They were dying, and I made a request, could I go collect seeds for the preservation? The seeds, I think the oldest germinated lotus seeds are over 3,000 years old. From Egyptian tombs, they germinate just fine today. And they're found on lake beds for unknown thousands of years old all the time and still germinate. The seed coating is so hard. I use a grinding wheel and a pair of pliers. Just 5 seconds on the grinding wheel and they get so hot you can barely touch them. But that's how hard their protective coating is on the outside. So you can eat them when they're green and they're delicious. But once they've turned brown and they're mature, you can crack them and you can eat the inside seed, but you can't crack the outside shell with your teeth. You have to use pliers and break them open. But the seeds, I will say, taste when they're young like sweet corn. Then they taste a bit like a sweet pea, and then a bit like a sunflower, and then a bit like a chestnut. That's how we sort of define them by age. And everyone likes the sweet corn the best, the youngest seeds. They're very sweet. We eat so many of them. At some point, I thought maybe they were addictive and I was harming my children. They loved them that much. They would hide them. They would broker deals to get lotus seeds from customers. They'd say, uh, I'll give you a colored rock and two drawings if you get me that seed pod over there. But they really are delicious and incredibly nutritious, and they have no addictive qualities or anything else wrong with them. They're just delicious. Um, I use lotus leaf tea to lower my cholesterol. And in the top picture there, because all parts of the lotus are used for medicine, a 4-inch square of lotus leaf, dried green, not brown, will lower your cholesterol. Also affects high blood pressure. And the Chinese call it that it cleans your blood, that it cleans impurities out of your kidneys, that it cleans impurities out of your liver. And I've done it twice. I've let my cholesterol get up very high to the really dark red section that says, oh no, you have to fix that. I cannot take statins. And I drink lotus leaf tea, and I've dropped it 40 points both times in 90 days. So it is an alternative for people who are statin resistant. And I just use myself as a guinea pig. But the stamens, the young seed pods, all of those are used for medicine in China. When you cut the seeds open, or when you file them, either with a wood filer, grinding wheel, the water gets in and then the rest of the seed coating breaks open. But the inside of every single lotus seed, no matter what cultivar it came from, looks exactly the same. 2 leaves. If you take those little leaves out when you're eating the seeds that are soft before the seed coats have hardened, you have to peel off the green coating when you eat them fresh, which becomes the brown coating that you can't penetrate when they dry. But if you pull those leaves out and you dry those and make tea with those, they help you sleep at night. So even the little embryonic leaves inside the seeds are used for medicine. And they sprout in about 7 days. When they get a stem, most people say to float them in a jar and then transplant them once they've sprouted. I prefer to put them into the soil and then not touch them again. They're very sensitive at that stage before they've developed a root system. So I just let them go. These are what would constitute all edible seeds at different stages. And as I said, you peel that outside green seed coating, and the inside is a very yellowish, whitish, very delicious seed. And again, the various seed pod colors in more modern hybrids. But no matter what color they all taste delicious. And newer hybrids have all kinds of crazy seed pod patterns. So what used to be the norm is the bottom left. Almost every lotus seed pod looked like that. Now there's all kinds of crazy kinds and all kinds of sizes, and ones that we call shower heads that point down when they're finished. Some that get a curly cue before they dry out after they drop their petals. So each cultivar has a specific type of lotus pod with it. They are grown for food. The ones in the foreground here are edible lotus, and you can see all the lotus in the background. None of them are the monster size of these. They make great big fat tubers, 3-4 inches in diameter, and the leaves are they're a 32-inch pot, so you can tell those leaves are almost 32 inches. The leaves are used for food. You can steam food inside of them. You roll like a wax paper sandwich. The roots, the stems, the shoots, every part of them is edible. Every part of all lotus is edible, but I will say the smaller the lotus, the more bitter the taste. The larger the lotus, the sweeter the taste. But for people looking to grow lotus as part of a food crop, the edible ones are made, they're cultivated for eating. So you're looking at more tender, they're easier for chewing. They have less, they're a bit like okra, so they have a thickening agent. So the larger edible ones are less like that. They're just sweeter and more tender. and all parts can be eaten, and you just harvest once a year, and they stay in the refrigerator for like months. They get really big. That's my hand in the center. So they get very, very large. They make umbrellas instead of hats. And when you buy them in the market, they cut off all the new shoots at the Asian market so that they can't be grown. And you buy them, they look like that. With all the shoots removed, and then they put a wax coating on so they won't sprout. When in China, we had lotus leaf juice and lotus root juice, both very healthy, very delicious. And all kinds of food can be made with lotus. They're beautiful, they're tender, they make great potato chips. Even the flower petals can be deep fried. And all of that. We ate just about every kind of anything that you could eat from a lotus. We ate it well in China. They were very good to us that way. The one on the left, they call popped lotus seeds, but they're actually not. They're a water lily seed. They're still, as Kathy said in the beginning, some conflict between water lily and lotus. So they actually come from a lily seed, but the ones on the right are a candy made from lotus root. The tea, you can buy the tea loose, or you can buy the tea in 4-inch squares. Either way, it works for blood cholesterol, all of those other attributes. They make fabric from the stems. The fabric cools you in the summer, warms you in the winter, and it takes about 200,000 stems to make a set of monk's robes. All done primarily as a volunteer effort. But I did buy myself some small scarves because it goes for $700 to $1,400 a yard for lotus fabric. Very expensive, but it wears like iron, and it actually really does change. It's temperature regulating plant, and the fabric that is made from it is actually temperature regulating also. Grown in almost every Asian country for all of the same reasons, food and medicine. And there are cultivars by the thousands that are unrecognized that have just happened naturally. These were cut early because they're going to be used for worship so that they won't drop their petals. They're often displayed this way in market and offered in part of ritual prayer. And they are, because they are temperature regulating, a lot of insects will sleep inside the lotus blossoms at night. And it can be as warm as 84 degrees, I think, out inside the flower and 40 degrees outside the flower. There are very few plants in the world that regulate their temperature. And there are insects that replicate themselves to not be found inside of a lotus plant. Frogs will sleep inside the flowers because it's very warm in there at night. And they hide themselves, they tuck themselves right in the petals. Bumblebees sleep in there, and when the flowers open, the bumblebees are often still asleep. So it's really fun with children to pet the bumblebees that are still sleeping, and they get a little irritated and then they go on. Harvesting them is very easy. All the new tubers, they're much like a potato. You plant a potato, that potato grows a plant, but the potato you planted died. So it grows all summer, and then it has new potatoes. And lotus is very much the same, except the potatoes look like bananas connected end to end. So you collect those and you replant them, but you don't have to. If you have a large vessel, you don't have to do it very often. I mean, Longwood went 20 years. I do mine every other year, probably. I think it's easier if you do it every year. You can just remove old growth and leave the new growth on the bottom. Every 2 to 3 years, I flip them and pull out tubers just to thin it out so it doesn't, so there's more nutrients to go around in the soil. They get a little bit tangled, but they're really very easy. Once they're harvested, if you can see in the center, there are really big ones that are long and skinny, and there are little short ones that are like little fat things, like little round, all pudgy almost round balls that are connected end to end. But all of them are connected end to end with new shoots on one end and where they grew from the previous year before on the other end. On the all the way right, they should arrive white and firm. Those were some that I had ordered from someone, and they came in. Obviously, they had not been handled properly. So when you do receive them, you want them to look like those on the left or the center. And once those bananas start to run, that's what happens all growing season. They run and run around and around in that pot, and then in the fall, they make new potatoes or bananas or lotus tubers. Or so feed, to plant them, press them into the soil, fertilize after they get stand-up leaves. I don't cut mine halfway. I leave mine long like that. The more opportunity for water to get into the tuber, the more opportunity there is for disease to get into the tuber. So I like to leave my bananas connected and sell them intact, whole, several bananas connected. Some people cut them. It's been my experience this was someone else's slide, but it's been my experience that that's not as lucrative. Natural cultivars, these are from a remote area somewhere in China. It was a friend of ours, Grant Mitchell. He's on a lotus hunt all the time. And the variation in flower shapes, the traditional lotus flower, is still around in many cultivars in many different colors, but there are also some of these multi-petaled ones that take on completely unique colors, shapes. This is a pond. It's just let to go free. That's actually in Australia. And at night, I think that there are a few plants in the world that have the kind of beautiful contrast and bold texture in the garden as Lotus has to offer so easily to be added anywhere. And these are just newer cultivars. This is one called Princess Ellen. It blooms like crazy, a double pink. It's become one of my favorites. I used it in a golf course planting, and it is phenomenal. High Cotton is a double white, very dreamy. Just a hint of yellow makes it like buttercream in the center. It's one of the most photogenic lotus. I love it. This is one called, I think this is Green Maiden, and there's a similar one called Dancing Phoenix. This is jewel flower. If it's backlit from the sun, it literally looks like it's on fire. Lots of petals. The petals sort of evoke the imagery of fire and also the color. This is very new. The Chinese didn't have a lot of American lotus for making cultivars, so almost all of theirs were white, pink, and what they called red, which was dark pink. But now there are beautiful yellow cultivars. This one's called Autumn in Mulling, and it has a completely unique flower shape. It's very easily distinguished from all other yellow lotus. There are true reds now, magnificent. And she starts with the white tips that are on the flower petals and mutates to no white tips somewhere mid-season. But it is definitely a true red, not a dark pink red, but a true red lotus. Visible from so far away. This is Walker Bradford. It's an incredible traditional shaped flower, hot pink, very well-mannered lotus. And with those new hybrid colors, different flower and pod shapes, there's also abundant foliage colors. We've had so much rain here in the mid-Atlantic. When the sun came out a couple of weeks ago for the first time in 3 weeks, all of my lotus got sunburned. So this color usually comes in early spring when it gets really cold at night, or in the fall when it gets really cold at night. But this came from sunburn straight up in the middle of summer. Because they hadn't seen the sun in so long. I think it's pretty wild. And in winter, I find, and my husband and I are always mesmerized at her beauty, even in decline. An absolutely stunning plant. Um, One of my customers, Anthony Archer Wills, has a client who did an entire photo documentary. These I was envious, so I took these photos. These were this is his photos. Um, Even at the end of the season, when they're going back to sleep, they are absolutely beautiful. They keep that repellent surface. The frost forms on the leaves like the dew does in the summertime. They're just always mutating, always changing, and always beautiful. Even their, empty seed pods or missing seed pods cast shadows. Um, and of course, they are abundant fun for children and grandchildren. My son would spend hours missing on the river eating seeds. He was always busy out there lost amongst the lotus patch. And making them into hats, we would wear them on the river because they keep your head cool. They really do regulate your temperature. Every part of the plant does. Um, that was his happy place as a child. And most children enjoy them. These are children from around the world. Um, and the petals make boats and they float off. My daughter would put little dolls on them, and my son would throw rocks at them. Um, I really did get to enjoy it through my children's eyes. They make blankets for the dog, and that is my son now, 20 years later, still wearing lotus hats. And that's the end.
Kelly, this has just been so mesmerizing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, uh, I have a question. Is there, how do you manage mosquitoes or your clients manage mosquitoes when introducing water in a pot like that?
So I will tell you, mosquitoes are seldom a problem. You can put small goldfish if you have a large enough container. You can put mosquito fish. Minnows will eat mosquitoes. Um, but I had a neighbor who called the health department twice,
Hmm.
and he came both times, and he said it was actually at my husband's old house when he lived there, and he wasn't really a client, I guess, but it wasn't called on me, it was called on him. But he said, it's the first time ever I've had two people call me on the same day. And I think this has to do with something else. And it was something else. But they were worried about getting Zika virus from mosquitoes because there was water on the patio. But mosquitoes choose a stagnant pool. And this is my belief only, but it's what I've witnessed for 40 years because um, it guarantees or increases the likelihood that there are no predators to eat their babies. So a stagnant pool indicates that there's a low oxygen level and there's an unlikelihood for there to be predators. Does that mean that they never use a lotus pool to lay eggs? No. In a drought, they're not just going to go, oh, well, we'll just not make babies because there's a drought. We're going to find something. So it is brief and it is occasional. It's generally before active growth in the spring and never in the winter because the mosquitoes are sleeping. And like I said in the beginning, we buried that one in the garden. Within 2 weeks, we had water boatmen and daphne and toads and tadpoles and frogs and bees and butterflies and water skates. All of those are predators to mosquitoes. So it's generally unlikely. We grew 500 to 700 lotus every year for 30 years when I was at Maryland Aquatic, and I can say we treated for mosquitoes maybe twice. They
Okay, that's
just don't
helpful to
choose it.
know. Thank you for those of us who do struggle with the mosquitoes. There are so many other questions, and I want to leave time to get to those.
Sure.
Um, what is the variety in your first 1997 photos container that you showed?
That was Mrs. Perry D. Slocum, and it is still to this day referred to as the Queen. And it is a cross between Hindu and American lotus. It's one of the first early crosses outside. What was the first early? One of the first early crosses in the United States, outside of China, who has a jump on the game. When I started, we had about 25 cultivars in the United States and China, and all combined countries now we're well over 4,000. So the game has changed, like it has with all other sectors of horticulture.
Yeah. And then Carol Allen asks if there's a particular brand of lotus leaf tea you buy. Skipping to that.
No,
Yeah.
I make my own with whatever lotus is in the nursery.
Okay.
And I don't cut mine in 4-inch squares because my leaves are round. In China, they use like a big heat press. They pull the bar down and it has like cookie cutters that are 4-inch squares. So they'll stack a bunch of leaves and they'll press and cut 4-inch squares and they tie them in a bundle. The only thing that's important is that I make them in triangles and I just go, well, if I cut this triangle in half, it would be close to 4 by 4. So you can buy them off of Amazon in a 4-inch square. That is the medicinal dose, and it's once a day. I drink lotus leaf tea just because it tastes good, and I use any and all. It doesn't matter which cultivar, but the medicinal dose is approximately a 4-inch square, which is stronger than if you just used a loose leaf, spoonful.
Okay. That's really good
Olivia,
information.
can I jump in and ask Kelly? So that's a dried lotus leaf, not fresh green.
You can use fresh green works better.
Okay.
But if you dry them, you want to dry them green. You don't want to take brown leaves that have dried on the plant.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Yeah,
That
they should be green. So brown lotus leaves have a different medicinal effect. So green lotus leaves work for what the Chinese call blood cleaning.
Hmm.
And it's just delicious. I mean, it's a very mild green tea. It just tastes green and mild. I put a little honey in and that's it.
That sounds lovely. Chris, I think you may not have the ability to come off mute, but I was going to ask you to if you could. Um, so jump in if you can't. Otherwise, I'm going to start reading your other questions. Have you seen any problems with various pests on lotuses, like leaf miners or borers? And if you do, how do you treat that?
So leaf miners and borers, yes, are present some years. It's like this year seems to be a very bad tick year, and a very bad aphid year. So they come sort of cyclical. I use dipel, which is a naturally occurring bacteria, BTI, BTK. One is for a fly larvae, one is for a moth larvae. They spray peaches up to the day of harvest. It's completely sublime to people, birds, animals, people. It's harmless bacteria, but not harmless to larval, like mosquito. Um, Actually, mosquito bits, mosquito dunks is one of the BTs, and I can never remember which one's BTI and which one's BTK. But very easy to get, completely natural and non-chemical and harmless to human beings. So you can dust with that.
Okay. Are the micro lotuses, the teacup lotus, as easy as the regular sized ones, the large ones?
They are, except fertilizing, you have to be cautious. I'd say it's kind of like the difference between a large tree and a bonsai. Bonsais require more regular care, more regular maintenance, and it's the watering. All lotus, because they make more oxygen than most plants on the planet, they they respirate. When you get into the middle of the growing season, July and August, they consume huge amounts of water to create that oxygen. And if leaves are underwater, you can see it's just bubbling out of the stems. So they do need to be watered more frequently, monitored more frequently, but their difficulty level is about the same.
Yeah.
They really don't need much.
Okay. And then are there variegated leaf lotus forms?
I have seen two. I don't know how stable they are. And from what I've heard, like other variegated plants, they're a little more difficult. They're not as, uh, maybe they don't have the vigor or the resilience that green leaved plants do in some cases.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, so I haven't tried them because I've heard it's, I don't want collector plants. I want plants that are going to perform and be 100% all the time.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I will tell you
Yeah,
that a member of the garden club named Dennis Hager will not do any variegated of any plant because he feels like they are not as hardy.
they
So
aren't in most cases. Yeah.
Then this is going to be the last question.
Mhm.
Can you just, for those of us who are so inspired by your enthusiasm and wonderful talk, can you help us get started? How much soil and sun are ideal when you are just starting out planting these?
So
Is it
soil
full
is
sun, part
cultivar
sun?
dependent. Patrick Nutt at Longwood Gardens was my first teacher, and his rule still applies today, no matter how many things I have tried and fooled around with. If it grows grass, it'll grow lotus and water lilies. It should be majority clay and some organic matter, so that if you squeeze a ball of soil, this was Patrick's explanation, and it makes a ball and you press it gently, the ball falls apart. That's the kind of soil that you want to use. You don't want too much organic matter because it'll ferment underwater, but you want enough to provide some nutrient to the plant. And if the organic matter is too much, then that ball of soil won't hold together with the clay. Um, so if it is a cultivar that gets like those big edible ones, they get huge, or there's one called Thousand Petals. It has 680 petals per flower. And some flowers will be multi-headed, so it can have thousands. That's how it got its name, thousands petal lotus. They're so heavy, they require a deeper soil depth to support the stems of the flowers. The little tiny ones, I grow them in as little as 2 inches of soil. Um, so the soil requirement sort of goes alongside the size of the plant, the depth. But you just want a clay-based, low organic. A lot of what you see at soil yards now is amended for, it's great for grass, it's great for gardens, it's great for vegetables, but not so good for lotus. Too
So
much
would you
organic matter.
so would you say that of the properties that soil typically contributes, that in this case, it's mostly physical support and less maybe nutrients, or are the nutrients in the clay important? The clay
So
is,
it's both. And if you look at, say, a very big pond, you can sink in mud up to your knees, and lotus will grow very deep into the mud if they have it. But what we've found as growers is that it doesn't require that depth of soil. So as we get older, things are heavier now than they used to be. So we use as little as the plant requires. You can give it more, and it'll be perfectly happy with more soil. But we do it so that we can tip the water out and make the pots as light and manageable as possible. So it's a little bit of both. There is something in clay that is very important to the growth of lotus, um, but also you don't want, you can give it more, but you don't need to kill yourself to have a foot deep of soil. It's wet, it's heavy.
yeah.
So we
Okay.
pretty much leverage it to what the plant requires.
And then how much sun or shade can they take, and what is their preference?
So if you have 4 hours, it would have to be between 10 and 2. Their preference is 6 hours. And to make them really, 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 really happy, it's from dawn to dusk. The hotter, the better. They love the heat and they grow. I worked with Dika on a DNA mapping from the equator all the way to Canada. And American lotus is largely unchanged. Most plants will alter their DNA. They will make modifications for different climates as over thousands of years they've moved. But lotus doesn't seem to care as long as the summer is sunny and hot. They do not grow well in England, and they do not grow well in um, the upper western parts of the United States or Canada because it's too rainy. It's just too rainy, and they don't do well in like Arizona, and that's because of the drying winds. They can't get enough moisture to the leaves to sustain their growth and protect them. Outside of that, the hotter the better. They love the sun. They love the heat. People often worry about the water's so hot. They don't care. They love it. They love it.
Got it. That is really helpful. Kelly, I want to just pass on the thanks from the entire Four Seasons Garden Club. I really appreciate your talk tonight, and there's lots of fun things in the chat, and I will forward that to you along with the recording afterwards. Thank you
Sure.
so much. If we can all just give a virtual round of applause.
Thank you.
I appreciate everybody tuning
It's
in.
my pleasure.
This is fantastic.